A lot of AI applications out there are nice to have, not need to have.
With experience as a Wall Street finance executive, managing over $4 billion in client funds, the venture capitalist leading a $100 million consumer retail tech fund, Kai co-founded Powers Gymnastics, the largest VC-backed acquisition firm in youth sports, and served as the CEO of EVT, the first cold brew tea company to market. Do you use AI for this data-driven decision-making?
Everyone has access to the data. It's how fast you consume and how fast you take action on it. So I've probably interviewed over 3,000 fund managers in my lifetime. I think for any CPG entrepreneur, they have to understand if you want to go national, you have to be ready to raise at least $15 million and kind of burn through that. The most practical thing I've used AI for in the research process is prompts now can build a deck for you at least 70% there. That's why I tell people now,
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Simple Tech Talk, where we explore the transformative impact of AI across businesses and industries. I'm your host, Johnny Palumbo, and today we have an extraordinary guest, Kai Wim. Kai is a seasoned entrepreneur, investor, and operator with an impressive track record of over 20 acquisitions across diverse industries. Currently, he's a partner at LTK Advisors, where he specializes in empowering entrepreneurs and business leaders with actionable strategies for growth. In the past, Kai co-founded Powers Gymnastics, the largest VC-backed acquisition firm in youth sports, and served as the CEO of EVT, the first cold brew tea company to market. With experience as a Wall Street finance executive, managing over $4 billion in client funds, and a venture capitalist leading a $100 million consumer retail tech fund, Kai's expertise spans finance, operations, and investment strategy. Kai, welcome to the show. I was hoping you could start off by sharing a bit about your journey from Wall Street to founding and scaling businesses, and tell me a little bit about how AI fits into the vision that you're building today.
cool. Yeah, Johnny, thanks for having me on here. Yeah, I mean, background, I spent over 12 years on Wall Street. Pretty broad applications. I did fund due diligence for about a decade at the bulge bracket firms. So I've probably interviewed over 3,000 fund managers in my lifetime. We would interview them, we would deploy capital to them. It's a lot of responsibility when it comes to that. I've always had the entrepreneurial itch. So even when I was working on Wall Street, I'd be like, what do you guys think of this? Like, should we do this, launch this? So in fact, actually several of my companies I launched were at the same time as working on Wall Street.
Okay.
So I mean, where it comes in is when I left Wall Street and started, EVT, we were VC backed. One of the top guys at Sam Adams invested in us. So we had the blessing of Boston Beer Company, which is always good to have, right? They invented Twisted Tea. So, that was a very easy collaboration for them to do. When you've been in kind of operations not long, especially in manufacturing, is all about process, right?
Okay.
So it's like process. So how can you build the SOPs? How can you build the processes so that it's, less people have to do it, less error, all that kind of stuff. So when you take that into account, like AI basically, helps you scale that up much faster.
Right. Yeah. So in today's day and age, we see a lot of that. We see a lot of AI replacing the business back end. AI allows startup founders to scale very easily. In fact, I had a conversation the other day just about how back in the day, our parents, our grandparents had a tough time founding a brick and mortar shop without some type of funding. But nowadays, you can launch your own AI startup with a couple $100s in the bank account. I was hoping you could tell me a bit about how you went through the journey of getting the backing for EVT and just about how you were balancing your nice and luxurious career in the corporate world and deciding to take that leap and go out on your own.
I mean, a lot of it wasn't very luxurious, but it was essentially, 60, 70-hour work weeks on Wall Street. I was doing EVT essentially nights and weekends. And then I also had a house that I'd bought in South Bay, which is now super, super high end in Boston. And I was doing Airbnb. I was the only person in the neighborhood that actually had a built out basement. So it was like a really nice. So a lot of people that rented out my Airbnb were marathon runners because they'd go for the Boston Marathon, right? And it was always be booked out like a year in advance, or at least months in advance. One of the interesting things that it allowed me to do was, especially with EVT, was to go to market with something that was already kind of proven out with data. because I'd done so many farmers markets and testing so many different flavors and combinations and packaging and that sort of stuff. I always recommend this to a lot of CPG entrepreneurs is all it is for the first 2 years is data collection. Like,
Okay.
don't worry about the sales. Don't worry about all that stuff. It's just all data collection because once you have that data, you actually know which direction to go into, right? What are your SKUs? What are your what is the shelf life you need? What is the packaging that you would need to attract your demo? Who is your demo, right? And so for the first 2 years of just doing farmers markets, I had so much data that it was like we know exactly what the four flavors we should launch because we have data to back it up. These are the ones that people have been testing and asking for. So when I first launched, it was all non-sweetened, right? It was like a healthier tea, version of tea, and we end up realizing that people want sweetened tea. They want a healthier version of it, but they want some sort of sweetener. Honey is okay. Cane sugar is kind of like iffy, especially in that demographic. We actually end up using a lot of stevia as part of the cold brewing process.
Well, Kai, thanks for the comprehensive rundown of your process through launching EVT. It is interesting to pick your mind just on what steps are necessary before going to VC, gathering that data, and getting the confidence to go and launch. Now, using EVT as an example for your entrepreneurial process, at what point did you know you had a product in EVT? At what point did you know that this was something worth quitting your job for?
I knew off the bat. It took data to kind of validate that. Actual turning point was when I remember I was looking at the Mintel research, right? It's like CPG consumer research, and they didn't have a category for cold brew tea. And so I was like 3-4 years into the company, and the time when Mintel released the research and it had cold brew tea as a category, you're like, okay, this is like legitimized. You know what I mean? And to follow up on that, the other validating kind of inflection points were when the other bigger tea companies were actually trying to steal our product, you know, and trying to figure it out. So I know Ito En is a Japanese company. They're pretty sizable. They don't have the same demo, so it's very hard for Ito En to market that to the younger millennial Gen Z crowd. Is generally like tea drinkers that understand what Ito En is all about already, because it's very Asian skewed, and a lot of their stuff didn't have a lot of sweeteners in the beginning too. So I remember we were at a fancy food show, and some of their reps were trying to come and steal our product, like actual bottles. Like they weren't tasting our stuff; they were actually trying to take our bottles, right? And I went over there and confronted the CEO, and obviously he wouldn't talk to me, you know. But little things like that is you realize that you kind of have something there.
I mean, that's a telltale sign if your competitor is sneaking in and stealing your recipe. I think there's similar stories with the Coca-Cola origins where how ferociously they had to defend their recipe.
Yeah.
Kai, so based off our last conversation, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but EVT was a big part of your life from 2016 to 2019. Obviously, a big period of time where right before the AI boom, the markets were looking great 2016 to 2019. But I'm curious, looking at this new world of AI, and we'll get into a bit later some of your current AI ventures. What were the biggest differences between starting a company in 2016 with the tech that was around back then versus what you've seen in today's day and age?
I think the overall market research off the bat. I think before it was a lot of firsthand research. You relied on a lot of research papers, relied on a lot of third party data that you can buy off data providers and that sort of stuff. So you kind of formulate this like thesis right before you launch your product or your company. Now it's like you can literally do that within a week, even down to like building the deck and all that stuff. Like you know, prompts now can build a deck for you, at least 70% there. Content, grammar, formatting, design, like that's all like automated through AI now. So that's why I tell people now, especially for things like that, it should be impeccable, right?
Right.
The tolerance for like those sort of mistakes has gone down drastically. I mean, even if you look at like resumes too, essentially a deck is kind of your resume, right? Is you give to investors to kind of see what you're all about. Like because you can control that, it should be literally impeccable. Like you shouldn't have any real errors grammatically. I mean, that should go out the door because prompts are essentially 100% accurate on that, and down to like things that you would need inside that deck. information like, TAM and market size and that sort of stuff should automatically be already included. So now investors kind of glean over that. Like, okay, it's there, great. Now tell me the nitty gritty, right? But in the past, it was like you would spend like sometimes weeks just gathering this data just to build that out.
There you go. So that's a good glimpse into the startup phase, getting the research. But as you and I both know, there's a lot that comes after that. So can you tell me a bit about where you guys went with EVT, how the operation scaled, and again, the same theme, just tell me a bit about how that might look different today using AI to build out a workforce, build out a team around a product.
I think that the strategy remains the same. So we were multi-pronged, right? So we had multiple sources of revenue. We had the the long-term game, which was, a ready-to-drink tea bottles, right? Because that builds out the consumer brand. For a conglomerate or like someone like Pepsi or Coke to purchase that, there has to be a brand that is scalable. And AI comes along with that. I'll give you an example. So we also had physical tea bars, right? Where you can actually go in and buy the tea and experience that. And then we had the B2B side, which was delivering kegs to offices like we had like Nike and Lalmian, all the corporate accounts in Boston. So with that, all the high margin business basically funded the art, the ready to drink side, the RTD tea side. Because it requires a lot of capital. In general, for a CPG company to go national, it takes about 15 million in capital. And I think for any CPG entrepreneur, they have to understand, like, if you want to go national, you have to be ready to raise at least $15 million and kind of burn through that, right? And that's just like distribution and manufacturing, distribution and marketing. You know what I mean? That's not even like AI won't really cut that down. You know what I'm saying? And it'll make
Yeah.
it like the process of getting there much more efficient. Like if I had to launch it again today, I think a lot of the manufacturing process would have AI, especially on the data collection side. um, I think a lot of the consumer data will be collected through AI instead of like going to farmers markets one by one. You can create funnels, you can create a lot of other stuff that can gather that data much faster and test it out much faster, especially when it comes to like what kind of SKUs you launch, what kind of flavors, that sort of stuff. It also I built out with my engineer at the time, built out a 10,000 square foot manufacturing facility out of Boston.
Wow.
I mean, what better place than New England to launch, a tea company, right? So
Especially with the backing of Sam Adams. Doesn't get better than that.
yeah, in the history of Boston. I mean, I still think tea is still a huge category that hasn't been untapped. Because if you talk to like Pepsi Ventures and a lot of the venture arms of these large conglomerates, there's only certain categories they can actually acquire it. You can do alcoholic, you can do coffee, you can do water, you can do wine. Kombucha's kind of been tapped out. And then what's the next largest one is tea. Like global consumption of tea is ridiculous. And with the US being in its infancies of tea consumption, like the tea consumers here are very, I believe it in the early stages. Whereas you
Okay.
go to like Southeast Asia, people kind of have grown up with tea in the culture on a daily basis. Here, it's kind of like a one-off thing. You know what I mean? So I think there's much more room for it to grow versus coffee. Which is like, why is there another cold brew coffee being launched? Every other month, right? Because like, how can you even tap that market in a way where you take enough of the market where you can actually exit? So
You're right.
you see what I mean? So like if you thought about that even before you started the company, like a microbrew, that's totally fine. I think that's makes for a better like lifestyle business as opposed to something that's venture backed.
That's great. And you got me sitting in the shoes of the listener over here. I love as we explore AI across different industries, getting to know industries like the tea industry where I completely blind to a lot of this. Wrapping up the conversation on EVT, we appreciate you sharing your insights on that area. And I think that was a great conversation because it helped us highlight just how different launching a company, launching a product might be today versus just 8 years ago. But sort of bridging into how you got into developing Gloria, how you got involved with AI projects of any way, shape, and form. You've clearly got a lot of experience across different industries. I'm curious to hear what industry do you see being the most disrupted by AI within the next decade? And are there sectors you feel are underestimating its impact.
I want to caveat that I am not an AI expert in any way, shape, or form, right? And I'm smart enough to know that. You know what I mean? That's why I love for an industry like that, especially when if you compare it to like crypto when it first launched. Honestly, 50% of the crypto uh, people should have not even gone into crypto in that
Right.
sense, right? They shouldn't have started crypto companies. What they should have done was partnered with other crypto people or benchmark it, right? So if you look at Gloria, if I'm partnering with my friend Jesse, Jesse's like the brainchild behind I'm
Right.
Gloria. So if you like, for people who are like, I want to know what the backend engine does and all that stuff. Like, I'm not the person to talk about that. What I like to talk about more is the pragmatic application of that. Does that make sense? Because I think
Yes.
a lot of AI applications out there are nice to have, not need to have, right? And it's so you get to that past that point, a lot of it is kind of just testing what the model is. I know there's a couple out there that does web design for you, and I don't think they quite have that down. But once they have that down, I believe that's going to wipe out all web designers, like like the majority of the web designers, because there's not. I can't think of any web designer that I've seen. I've seen really good web designers. Like one of my good friends, was basically one of the guys that helped build out the O network for Oprah, right? And it's like I can't think of anything that he's done that AI can't basically replicate. You know what
Right.
I mean? At a much higher efficiency rate of like less errors. But what I really like is companies that apply these AI models to their everyday process. I'll give you an
Right.
example. I talked to a friend that is looking to sell his lighting business, right? His
Okay.
family runs a lighting business, pretty sizable. They do about 10 million in sales, and they have a sales team that uses AI to basically help with the CRM, update all the information, collect data, and basically delegate it to their salespeople. The salespeople still make the calls, but it's much more efficient. You're basically being armed with a bazooka as opposed to 9 millimeter, right?
Right.
And because of that, their sales team can basically 10x what their competitors do. And so he came to me and he said, my family's looking to sell the business. Can I leverage that AI to get a higher multiple on the sale? And my thing was like, the only thing because it's so early in that stage that a lot of P firms and acquirers or people that you exit to don't see that as much value add right now because they can't really see what's under the hood, right? What they see is just higher sales, right? But they don't
Yes.
see the actual model underneath. So they don't consider that like a true competitor's advantage because
Yep.
there's nothing stopping another company from learning that AI and doing the same thing. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
yes, they do have that. Is it more efficient? Yes. But is it something that's defensible? That's the key part, right? So, and I would say no. I mean, it's just the process has been built out, but there's nothing defensible about it. Like someone else can come in, hire a consultant, bring in some young AI guys and implement that. I don't think that's super impossible. So it's so early in the stage where I was like, the multiple doesn't change. Like the only change is your higher sales.
Right.
So whatever you brought in with your AI implementation is the additional sales, but there's no additional multiple because you use AI. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I mean, it makes sense to me. And I think it really does a good job of highlighting the trend that we're seeing across the industry is that AI isn't an optional operations booster. It is an essential adopt or get left behind. So I don't think that they're going to increase their value by using AI, but definitely would be facing a decrease in value should they not be using it.
That is very well said. That's very well said.
And I think that the catbird seat, the great spot to be is to be in the shoes of someone like yourself, where you don't understand the machine learning algorithm beneath it, but you understand it well enough and you understand the use cases and pragmatism enough where you can go and create a real business impact around it. Getting into a bit more about creating a sustainable competitive advantage that you need to see to really be a true adopter of AI. Tell us a bit about Gloria. Tell us about how the model works, what business owners could use it for, and what our business owner listeners should be checking out after the episode.
Yeah, so I am Gloria. My buddy Jesse has invested quite a bit of money in building it out. So I like partnering with people that have these visions, right? But they need essentially what an operator in the business, basically do the day to day operations and to apply that into like a business sense. I think a lot of companies build out these large models and what they want to spend time on is basically using applications of it. Where does it apply to? So Gloria, I am Gloria essentially is a model where you can essentially replicate sales calls. And the way that that's helpful in the beginning is we've been using it for debt collection, is kind of automating and using AI for the dialing the numbers, for texting, and for the calls, for kind of like the qualifying questions. The basic stuff. Is this so and so? Yes. Great. And making it more friendly, because
Yeah.
I think like the typical thing is, it's not what you say, it's how you say it, right? And so for conversion, that's what you really want to focus on, is inflection in the voice, like the friendliness, terminology, that sort of thing. So as things get closer to, you know make sounding realer, it's not just replicating like some famous person's voice. It's
Right.
the terminology they would use as well. So I think the script is also really important, and that's something I and Gloria spent a lot of time working on.
I love it. Well, we appreciate the breakdown into what I Am Gloria is capable of. For our listeners, we will link it down in the show notes after the episode. But if you want to go check it out online right now, I believe it is iamgloria.com. So go give that a check. I spent a good amount of my weekend looking through it. I think there's some really exciting things you guys have in the future. I'd like to ask you a couple more questions, just overarching themes of the episode. You did your career in VC doing due diligence, and you're doing sort of a career in AI, talking about debt collection and doing software sales. So I want to talk a little bit about AI in deal analysis. You mentioned analyzing franchise disclosure documents and creating white papers to understand industry. Do you use AI for this data-driven decision making in acquisitions? And if so, what's been your most valuable insight that you get from the AI?
Yeah, I think the most practical thing I've used AI for in the research process is consuming the information, right? If you
Okay.
look at like FDD disclosure or FDD, I mean, someone can go over 200 pages, you know? So what it allows you to do is take what used to take 2 weeks into a couple hours, right? So then you build out a process using Zapier or whatever you want to accumulate all the information, in a fraction of the time. Because right now, it's not everyone has access to the data. It's how fast you consume and how fast you take action on it, right?
Right.
So if I look at an opportunity and I find an opportunity, great, you found the opportunity, but how fast can you act on that opportunity? And I've used AI consistently on that, reaching out to the contact, setting up an LOI, submitting an offer, right? All that, AI has basically cut my time in by 10x at least. So I'll give you an example, right? If you have a buy box, it's got to be minimum, 500K to a million in EBIT. It has to have these operating margins, etc. You can use AI to comb through all the FDDs. You deposit all the FDDs into a folder. You have AI search through all of that and say, give me the only ones that fit those guidelines. I mean, either you use a script, or you were a dev and you automated the process, which was, was also time consuming, because most devs in the past, the rule was like, if you do it once, you do it, but if you do it twice, you automate it, right? And so
Right.
it still took time for a dev to automate that, right? Now it's like your everyday Joe can automate that.
Right. I love it. All right. I appreciate you running us through that. I think that's a good real life example of how we can use AI to augment a big part of the deal analysis process. And the real world use case is going to be helpful for our listeners as well. Got one more question for you. Outside of work, how do you use AI in your personal life? Are there any favorite tools or routines that you found surprisingly useful?
Yeah, there's another project I'm working on. It's a company called GameStamp, and essentially it use AI to create logos for like sports teams. Like your kid was part of, youth soccer league, you can create a logo really fast, press a button, and it sends it to a printer. Like AI is creeping on almost everything we do. You know, you think of like youth soccer leagues as like, okay, that's something my kids do, that's outside of work. But it's like AI has creeped up even into, you know, things that your kids do. Does that make sense? What I use AI for outside of work is sometimes I actually input jokes, and I'll say like, some of my favorite comedians are like Dave Chappelle and some of comedy goats, right? I'll
Okay.
take like a separate premise and I'll put it inside AI and I'll say, rewrite this joke in the form of my favorite comedian.
I love it.
And then I'll have them perform it to me. Like it's so cool to kind of see what, because like there's no limitation to what things like that, right? If I want to go watch Dave Chappelle, I gotta wait till he tours, you know what I mean? And he only does that several times a year. But I can have him tell me a joke tomorrow. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's insane.
Especially with the new voice bots, I'm wondering if you could, hey, write me a whole Dave Chappelle routine.
Exactly, right?
Give me a show right here, all for free. I love that.
With the timing and cadence and the, his taglines, you know?
I think we are barely scratching the surface of what we're gonna see AI do in the entertainment space. Maybe you'll be a part of that, Kai. Maybe I will be. For now, one final question for you. Using your advice, not as an AI expert, but as an AI expert integrator, for entrepreneurs looking to incorporate AI into their businesses, what are the first steps you'd recommend? And for those worried about being late to adopt AI, what's your take on that?
Honestly, I think it's never too late until, your barber is using AI, right? And that's totally possible by now. I was in Wall Street and I was really late to the crypto party. You know what I mean? I really didn't believe it because I was like Warren Buffett. I was like, there's no intrinsic value to this thing, right? Until probably like a decade later, I was like, okay, there's a use for it though, right? And there's value in the sense that it becomes rarer and rarer, right? Because you can't manipulate it in the sense of more supply in some of them, right? With I think to start off is to learn how to prompt it. I know it sounds simple, but there's so many ways you can prompt it. Because the way I prompt my AI is like I want them to understand my entire background. So I have several of these saved AI prompts, right? An expert content creator. I am an expert businessman that runs these businesses, right? So like to learn how to prompt it properly, it's made my life so much easier and it's made the I guess the hurdle of it less so. Does that make sense? So like in the beginning, it was very overwhelming. And I feel like a lot of people that are starting out kind of probably feel the same way. It's like, where do I start? Like, what can I even do? Once someone explains it to me in a way where it's like you can literally do anything you want, right?
Right.
Imagine, imagine like ChatGPT as the Elon Musk, but he's giving you advice only, right? And I was like, oh, okay, I finally get it because like using it was so overwhelming, you know? The other thing I would tell someone to do when they first start out is to leverage virtual assistants. So hire like a VA. They're very cheap. They're like 150 bucks, 300 bucks a month, and then teach them how to use the prompt because it builds that delegation skill out and you learn AI at the same time.
That's a great
So you
insight.
right. So like imagine having a team of VAs that can prompt even better than you, right? And
Yeah.
I think I'm calling it now. I think in the next 2-3 years, there are going to be companies that leverage entire VA teams. I mean, maybe even hundreds of them that just they all are each AI experts in their own right, right? In the sense that they use every single prompt. So I tell my team now, like, if you have a question for me on ops, it better have been run through AI first, right? Because like, what if that solves the problem for you, so you don't even need me? You know what I'm saying? So run everything through that first before you come to me, right? And I think that's just part of the process.
That's a great ideology. Kai, I appreciate you sharing your personal tactics, your business tactics, and everything in between. That's all for today's episode of Simple Tech Talk. A huge thank you to our guest, Kai Wynn, for sharing such invaluable insights into entrepreneurship, acquisitions, and the role AI plays in shaping the future of business. Your journey from Wall Street to scaling businesses across industries is nothing short of inspiring. If you've enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with anyone who'd benefit from today's discussion. You can follow Kai's work on Instagram at Passport Kai, that's spelled Khai, or explore his ventures through LTK Advisors and I Am Gloria. As always, I'm your host, Johnny Palumbo, and we'll see you next time as we continue to uncover how AI is transitioning the way we live and work. Thanks for tuning in.